Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening and welcome to House Talk with Dr. Lauren Pitts. I'm your host, Dr. Lauren Pitts. Tonight, Dr. Gregory Williams, no stranger to House Talk, is back and continues serving as our guest co-host this month. For those new to House Talk, Dr. Gregory Williams has a PhD in counseling and is a well-known speaker and teacher. Dr. Williams, it's always an honor to share the airwaves with you. Listeners, let me encourage you to pick up Dr. Williams' new book, Shattered by the Darkness, Putting the Pieces Back Together After Child Abuse.
Hey, it's fantastic to be with you tonight, Dr. Pitts, and we have an awesome information-packed show. So thanks for welcoming me back tonight. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Listeners, let me just tell you, Shattered by the Darkness is a must-read, and I wholeheartedly recommend sharing it with adult family members and friends. I'm also honored to tell you that joining us tonight is Dr. Erica Burgoon. Dr. Burgoon is a clinical psychologist specializing in child and adolescent psychology, which includes evaluation and intervention for youth who have experienced sexual abuse, physical abuse, and other traumas. Dr. Burgoon, it's my honor to welcome you to House Talk.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of the discussion tonight. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, welcome, Dr. Burgoon, also. And, April is what we call the Child Abuse Prevention Month and Awareness Month. And listeners, as you know, Dr. Pitts champions the notion, and it's your motto, is it not, Dr. Pitts? Strengthening families, one solution at a time. And what an awesome goal you have. And I just appreciate that so much. And with that comes Dr. Pitts' embrace of protecting the well-being of our children. So tonight, we're going to just continue our discussion on how we can raise awareness and take the necessary steps, and this is important, to protect and preserve the well-being of our youth. And we want you listeners to get involved and be part of the solution tonight also. So please don't wait. If you know of somebody, this is really important, of a child who is right now being abused or neglected, we're doing this right at the beginning of the show. Call the police, Child Protective Services, or you can also call the National Child Abuse Hotline, and that number is 1-800-422-4453. That's the National Child Abuse Hotline, 1-800-422-4453. And I am so excited about the amount of information that we have in tonight's show. And, of course, here's the good thing. We're really going to have fun with this tonight. We want to hear from the listeners, all of those. It's literally, am I lying to people tonight, Dr. Pitts? I don't think so. Literally around the world listening to us live right now. I want them to join in the conversation, even if they have a question or a comment, and they can call us directly live right now at 515-605-9744, and that is 515-605-9744. So we're just going to jump right in with both feet in tonight in our subject of preventing adverse childhood experiences and what is abbreviated as ACEs. Dr. Pitts.
Yes, indeed. So, Dr. Burgoon, Dr. Williams, tell us about ACEs and how this information can help prevent child abuse and neglect.
So the ACEs study, I frequently have heard it referred to as the most important public health study you've never heard about. Unfortunately, I think that second part you've never heard about has been changing over the last few years. But this was a study that came out of San Diego. It was conducted between 1995 and 1997 originally with over 17,000 participants. And the researchers who developed this study took a look at 10 potentially adversive or traumatic experiences that people may have before the age of 18. And what was startling is to find out that over 2/3 of the participants had experienced at least one of these. And they found 12.5% had experienced 4 or more. And these are things: physical abuse, sexual abuse, being raised by a parent with a substance abuse problem, or a parent with mental illness.
Yeah.
And what they found was that these, having even one of these could lead to, is associated with a whole host of problems later in adulthood: mental health problems, physical health problems. There's an economic impact. And so if we're not someone who has experienced one of these ourselves, we all know someone who has experienced many of these. We interact with people, our neighbors, our coworkers, and so many people we interact with on a daily basis are carrying the baggage of these experiences. So, we can all consider what role we can play with the children of today in helping to either prevent these experiences or at least minimize the impact for the youth we know today as they grow into adulthood.
Doctors, do you think, at least the same way that I feel, in the last possibly 12 months, ACEs, or this adverse childhood experience research, is becoming a lot more well-known and acceptable, and people are starting to tap into it because of the victims that are starting to come out of the shadows of abuse themselves at adults? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I absolutely think that people are becoming more aware of it. 10 years ago, when I would be in a crowd, and even a crowd of professionals in the mental health field, and someone would say, "Have you ever heard of ACEs?" Many people had not.
Right.
One of my roles in my job is training graduate students in psychology. So when I'm in a room with current trainees in psychology and someone asks that question now, there's almost like a quizzical look, like, why would you ask that? Of course I know what ACEs is. And I'm finding even colleagues in the education field, other parts of the healthcare field are increasingly familiar with the study and the takeaways from it.
It's interesting. I was in Las Vegas 3 weeks ago, and I'll be at another convention next week with therapists, professional therapists, counselors, social workers at the Tropicana Casino in the convention area. Let me tell you, it was a convention hall park, not the casino. And it was so. I was doing a presentation, and I always start off the same way, saying, "How many in this room?" And these are professionals that do this every day, like you two do every day of your life. I asked, "How many have heard of ACEs?" And I think 3 to 4 people, still in a room packed, raised their hands and said, "We've heard of it." And it's like, wow. Yeah. It's still not rampant out there yet, but I just have that gut feeling that it's starting to get major traction, and it's going to be such a well-known research, and there's going to be a lot more research. Even each state is going to be working on it to do their own research.
Yeah, and we're definitely seeing that over. Oh, I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead, Dr. Burgoon. Finish your thought.
I think we're definitely seeing over the last 10 years that other states, so, the initial study, as I said, was nearly 25 years ago, but other states, through this project called the Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System, are doing their own studies on ACEs and collecting the data.
Yeah.
It is. The research is certainly is coming to the forefront, and what I'm finding extremely interesting is that, for example, myself, when I took the assessment, my ACEs score was an 8 out of the maximum 10, right? So when I think about this research that's being done and how important it is for those of us that are aware of ACEs to create this awareness throughout our disciplines, throughout our communities, throughout, the legislative bodies, it's paramount because I'm 51 years old, soon to be 52, and I look at my ACEs score and I'm like, wow, look at all of these things that, granted, not everybody may be impacted, but I certainly was. When I look at my life journey and how those things that happened to me during my childhood influenced my adolescent years, influenced my young adult years, and even to a degree even still influece me, which, in the grand scheme of things, it fueled my decision to become a couple marriage and family therapist, right? And I think that it's so important that the masses know about this, because how many adults are walking around out there with all of this symptomology because they've experienced ACEs and they don't even know it. They don't even fully comprehend why their life is the way it is. They can say, oh, well, I was abused, or, oh, I was neglected. But to really understand definitively why they think the way they think, why they behave the way they behave, why they process information, why they parent the way that they do or don't. I think that it's so crucial that everybody, as many people as we can possibly inform about ACEs, I think that it's critical for us to do that and to make sure that we are sounding the horn and bringing this to everybody's attention, because to some degree, shape, form, or fashion, personally and professionally, I believe everybody in society is impacted by ACEs, which brings me to my next question, doctors. So when we think about ACEs, how do ACEs affect our lives and society, and what strategies can we implement to address them?
Sure. Well, so, while your ACEs score is not necessarily your destiny, the more ACEs you have, essentially, the higher the risk for any host of problems, as we were saying earlier, physical problems, emotional problems. You mentioned it may affect the way you parent, it may affect the way you interact with others. And one way I've heard people put this is, most of us, we know what we weigh, we know what our blood pressure is, and we know that number, again, not destiny, but may spell out certain risks for us. So we should know what our ACEs score is. And how that can impact, who we are in the world and how we interact with others. And just being aware of what they're...
Go ahead. Yeah, I'm just going to ask. I was going to throw out a question. Do you feel that either one of you, that our ACEs that we've experienced, it affects the way I sleep, the way I don't sleep, the way I prepare my clothes and my socks and my shoes in orderly fashion every night before I turn the lights off? Everything I do has been affected by what's happened to me as a child. Although, like you said, it's not my destiny. But I think now that we are becoming more aware of it, and I don't know if either one of you have heard or had much experience with it. I'm sure you have. But the informed, the traumatized, the trauma-informed communities, hospitals, schools, businesses are starting to become really popular now. And I think it's influencing or impacting our sensitivity to other people around us and how we deal with each other. And I think that's going to be a key to be able to become more of a community again, instead of everybody carrying their own baggage and hope I don't bump into you.
Right. Where I work in a residential facility for young children, and we endeavor to be trauma informed. And so one of the things we talk about frequently is, kind of the old way of thinking would be to ask, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with this kid? Why do they act this way? A trauma informed way to think, and based on the ACEs study, is what's happened to you. What are those experiences that you've had that have led you to express emotion in this way, or deal with your feelings in this way, as opposed to perhaps a more adaptive way?
I was reading your bio today, Dr. Burgoon, and it just makes mine look like I ought to be at the grocery store bagging groceries. But anyway, it's very impressive. Both of your bios are very impressive compared to mine. Okay, let's just be honest. But anyway, with that thought in mind, I think my purpose in life, my destiny, is to take all of the complicated gunk of ACEs and break all the large words down to something simple that a truck driver is going to want to listen to or read. The grocery bagger at the store, a cab driver, a normal person that doesn't have 3 letters or initials after their name can understand and put skin on all of this research in such a simple format of being able to say, you know, what does this all mean? This all means that if I run into somebody in church and they are always bitter or they're always seem like they're mad at me, I need to take a step back instead of becoming offensive or defensive. Take a step back and go, you know, they may have something in their life. This isn't about me and them. This may be about something that they have dealt with or just left their home from or had in their childhood. I need to be more aware and understanding that it's not always a fight between me and you. It's the baggage that you're carrying and the nerves that are exposed. And how do I deal with that? And that's kind of what I think my goal is to break this not too complicated down into very simple 2 or 3 word sentences to where we can apply it. That's what I enjoy doing more so than trying to complicate it.
I think that's huge, Mr. Williams, because when I think about my ACEs, as Dr. Burgoon said, it isn't your destiny, right? But for me, you know, certainly earlier on in my life, particularly in my youth and adolescence, I would definitely say that ACEs definitely adversely impacted my youth and my adolescence and really did govern how I behaved in these inappropriate ways in so many areas of my life. But as I got later on in adolescence and then went into adulthood, the ACEs fueled my desire to turn the adversities of my life into opportunities for other people. My arrogance, but my brain said, if I don't use all of this stuff that's happened to me as a stepping stone to improve the lives of other people, then I felt like somehow life would have defeated me, right? So for me, I'm like,
preach it.
You know, as competitive as I am, I'm like, okay, well, life doesn't get to just kick me around forever. I have to, you know, get up, dust myself off, and try again and try again and try again and try again. So for me, it governed everything that I was doing in a positive way. And, oh, by the way, being a teen mom, which, as we know, is one of those things that tends to come into play when you have experienced ACEs. I was pregnant as a teenager. I did indulge in substance use and abuse for quite some time, but it was a wake-up call for me that, okay, wait a minute. I didn't want my son's life to be comparable to my own. So without even knowing that there was something called an adverse childhood experience, I wanted to protect my unborn child and then my son from those things. Before we go on and you all jump in, I want to let you know the switchboard is lighting up. So listeners, you're listening to House Talk with Dr. Lauren Pitts, and we want to hear from you, so join the conversation. To comment or ask a question, please call 515-605-9744. That's 515-605-9744. Caller 9477, you are on the air. Welcome to House Talk. What is your comment or question?
My question is this. Is it naive to think that there are some definite things that could be done to help prevent ACEs before they happen? I'm in family ministry, and it's important to know these things from trained professionals.
You know, I think there's a... Go ahead, Doctor.
I think there's a few things that that are accessible to all of us that we can try to implement to, if not completely prevent, to minimize. One of the things that I think is accessible to all of us is to be some child's champion. Dr. Pitts just spoke about wanting to do this for her own son. Many of us who have parents, of course, want to be that person for our own child. But, when you notice that child that's struggling, the child that's acting in very unlovable ways, that's probably the kid that most needs that champion, that loving adult. We know that, one of the biggest predictors of resiliency in children, in recovery from children who have experienced trauma, is to have a consistently supportive adult in their corner. Another thing that, that all of us can, if we can't, execute directly, could probably in some way contribute to is we need more parenting support available.
Yes.
Parenting is the most challenging, difficult, and important job in the world. And for most of us who are, have a job of some sort, we received training, we received education, yet we seem to have this idea that people just will know how to parent and how to parent well. And it's a skill, and it's not a skill that comes easily to everyone. So the more that we can kind of make parenting classes and training and support accessible to people, so that parents can understand things like what do children need beyond having their basic physical needs met? What are realistic expectations for children at different stages of life? Those are things that could potentially contribute to at least the minimization of some of these adverse experiences.
With the news just the last week or two of the colleges where some of the celebrities have paid their child's way to spend $500,000 or $1 million to get them in these very uppity colleges, pristine colleges, and to kind of bribe their way to get their child in. I think it's those type of situations when our children or grandchildren hear that kind of thing, it's a perfect opportunity for us to teach our kids, hey, now wait, do you see what's going on there? Sometimes parents want to jump in and fix everything for their child when they're in situations. So like the question was, how can we prevent or help? I think one of those things is sometimes don't always fix the child's problem. Show them how and teach and train them how to fix their own problem. And as a man, sometimes when your child would come up and their toy is broke or the tires off the truck or an arm's off their G.I. Joe, we wanted to fix it and hand it back and say all is well. But in life, when a child has a problem, we need to say, let me tell you, this is the steps you need to take. Get on their level and teach them how to deal with problems instead of always coming in and being the rescuer, because they need to learn. We need to train them how to deal with problems.
It's a really important way to build resiliency in our kids.
Yes.
And resiliency is really, really key. When we take into consideration, some of the challenges that our children are facing just in society today, going to public school or even private school, as the other two doctors said, it's really important that we nurture the parent and we help them to parent effectively and to recognize that they may not have all of the answers, but that there are support systems that are either in place for them already or that can get put into place. And that's something that hopefully we'll get a chance to touch on a little bit before we end the show tonight, is how important it is for community at large to be involved in providing support systems for parents and for families to be proactive in putting these preventative measures in place. Caller, does that help?
And one thing I think
it does. Thank you. That confirms what I already thought must be one of the answers, is to step back to what goes before, which is the family atmosphere, the parent.
Yes. And put the phone down. Put your phone down, parents.
Yeah.
Start making eye contact with your children, not with their foreheads or your foreheads. Don't allow the phone to be at your dinner table. Don't allow, certain things. We have just absolutely let technology run our world. I was at the hospital yesterday, and I announced to my friend, I said, I think what we need to do is have a telephone lane in the hallway, because you can't even walk down the hospital hallways anymore because people are walking into each other because they're too busy on their phone. Nobody says good morning. Nobody smiles. Nobody makes eye contact. And it's the same way in our family homes. And we will pay big time for that, not interacting and loving and caring and communicating with the children that's sitting right in front of us. How dare us?
Yeah, that time in with your kids is so important. Giving them even a small portion of your day, even just a few minutes of your undivided attention, and and really being very present with them, very mindful of them. That's good time to model social skills, model healthy expression of emotion. Those things that we would like to see our kids doing rather than acting out their feelings in negative ways.
And what we'd like to see our children do with our grandchildren when they raise them. We need to teach them how to treat we can train our kids how to be better parents too when they get to that age by giving them that quality time. Yeah.
Caller, does that help?
It does. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for calling House Talk. Have a good evening.
You too.
We have another caller. Caller
Awesome.
2043, you're on the air. Welcome to House Talk. What is your question or comment?
How realistic is it to think we could have an ACE-free society?
Oh, wow.
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 Yeah, I don't think that's possible.
What about my pay grade?
I think that is possible, but you know what it's called? Heaven. One day we will have an ACE-free society, but I think we can sure have a less ACE evident society by teaching the parents and training the parents, like Dr. Burgoon said, to start helping us and everyone around us to learn the importance of those things that traumatize our children are major to them, and it has lifelong effects. And when we start understanding that, when we start understanding what divorce does to a 6-year-old child, it's one of those issues that can cause something later on in life. I think just becoming more educated in teaching and training and learning about this can sure eliminate some ACEs when we become more sensitive to it. But Dr. Burgoon, what do you think?
Yeah, it sure sounds wonderful. Realistically, it's hard for me to imagine getting into an ACE-free situation. But yes, I think the more we can do preventatively to minimize ACEs, and then the other side of the coin is, what we can do to help kind of minimize the damage from ACEs as people grow into adulthood.
Yeah.
Breaking the cycle, because I know, Dr. Pitts, you did this because you're turning all of your negative, because that's my motto on my work, is turning negatives into positives, which is similar to yours. But you've done this. You broke the cycle. I broke the cycle in my family. My dad abused me, and I did everything in my power to make sure that cycle got broken. And I think that's important. So, Dr. Pitts, what do you think about that?
I think it's crucial, and as you both said, I don't know that it's necessarily realistic, but I do think that we have the ability, to ensure that our children are not exposed to the harm and the abuse And I think that we need to be aiming for that as a society. I think that it needs to be deliberate and intentional because we do have the ability to protect our children. It's a choice. And quite frankly, I think that as a society, it's our moral and our legal obligation. We certainly recognize that it's difficult to end all of these risk factors, like you said, divorce that breaks down the family, for instance. But what we certainly can do societally and individually in our homes is we can be deliberate and intentional in working to reduce the harm associated with those risk factors. And it really has to be a deliberate and intentional choice. We have to be willing to take the necessary steps to reach for support and help and to acknowledge that these things are happening. And we've been sharing with you all month how these adverse behaviors can have a negative impact on our children. So I think that we have to choose and recognize that it's our moral and legal obligation to do a much, much better job individually and collaboratively as a society to work toward an ACE-free society. Does that help, caller?
Right.
Yes, but it leads to other questions for me.
Uh-oh.
Because oftentimes you see someone in a situation and the parent doesn't acknowledge that they are part of the problem for that child.
That's good.
Oh. Yeah. Who wants to jump in on that one?
I'm gonna let you go first.
Sure. So I think a starting point there is to realize if you have a parent who is parenting in a way that isn't healthy for a child and doesn't really see the problem or acknowledge the problem, keep in mind that they themselves are likely a product of the environment that they were raised, the ACEs that they were raised with. And so it may be hard to keep that sense of empathy, but it's probably a lot easier to join with that person and, come along with them if you can see them as someone who also has been hurt, versus come at people kind of in an accusatory way. So I think, if you're in a situation like that and you know someone who is raising a child in a less than ideal situation, to try to get to know them, to understand them, to come alongside them, to support them, you're much likely to get some buy-in from them at some point if you've been a supportive presence, if you've been engaging, and maybe if you're in this kind of situation to do so, to also offer some relief, some respite. Can you take their child out for ice cream? Can you take them to the park? Can you spend some positive time with that child and maybe give that parent some of the support and the break that they need? That's how people change, is through relationships. I know it's all of us have probably been in that situation where we want someone to open their eyes and we want them to open their eyes today. But sometimes we have to invest that time in building the relationship that might, eventually lead to some change in that parent's life, in that child's life, in that family's life.
Wow, good stuff.
Yeah, and I will tell you, folks, our time is winding up. We only have about 10, 11 minutes left before we close out tonight's show. Caller, I hope that information certainly helped you. If you want to sort of check in at the conclusion of the show, we will be posting some keys, if you will, for your key ring, which is what we consider some solution-focused strategies that will help you to apply some of the things that we're sharing tonight. And you're more than welcome, to reach out to us on social media or shoot us an email with the additional questions that you have, and we will certainly do our level best to address those questions.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate
Thank you for calling Health Talk. Have a good night.
Well, I'll tell you what, doctors, I am in the presence of some wonderful wisdom tonight, and you guys are awesome. One more real quick question, since she said Dr. Pitts said we had a few more minutes. What are a few steps, and either one of the doctors, what are a few steps that the listeners can take to create safe, stable, nurturing relationships and environments for all the children? What's just a few steps? Either one of you.
I think for one good starting point is what we call unconditional positive regard.
My lands.
Sometimes children do some, very unsavory, unlovable things, and the behavior may be a problem, and that doesn't mean we don't address the behavior, but we love the child no matter what. We convey the message that, you're okay. I support you. I care about you no matter what, and creating that sense of belonging for the child.
If our listeners don't hear anything but that, Doctor, it was worth them listening to us for 30 minutes. Unconditional acceptance and love. That is awesome. Okay, I'll shut up now. Go ahead, keep going. I'm excited.
I think just that sense of belonging, that sense that, I mean something to someone. Predictability is also so important for children. If you're in the presence of some child's life, whether a parent or a teacher or a caregiver, to create routines, to create tradition. And that doesn't mean that you can't ever, veer off course. But for the most part, the kids know what to expect from you. They know who you are. They don't have to question who you're going to be from day to day and how you're going to behave from day to day. That creates a real sense of safety for kids as well.
Wow.
Just
Dr.
to piggyback
Pitts,
on that. Yeah, I was just going to say to piggyback on that, and it speaks to what Dr. Burgoon said to the last caller. I think it's so important to not be judgmental and critical, and I'm always amazed in our line of work when parents act like they gave birth to an alien. How did this child get this way? They didn't come out of the womb. Children are products of their environment. And people, as Dr. Burgoon said, because the children, get to this place and space where they're engaging in these unlovable behaviors, I think that it's important to separate the child from the behavior. The behavior is just that. It's the behavior. It's not who the child is. It's what they do. And recognizing that they learned it from somewhere. Hello. And people forget that. I think that it is paramount that parents remember that children are sponges, and they do pick up some habits at school, but the bulk of their time, the bulk of their nurturance or lack of nurturance comes from their home environment. So when you're busy, looking at this kid that's driving you crazy, you might want to look in the mirror, because if you look a little deeper and you choose to be honest with yourself, it's a strong possibility that you're seeing yourself in that child.
Yes.
Mhm.
Woo, doggies! I tell you what, we should take this show on the road, because this was enough information tonight. We should have we ought to be on Larry King or whatever. This is such good information. I have thoroughly enjoyed, and I tell you what, as we wind down, I just want to throw out a couple keys for the takeaways, and then Dr. Burgoon or Dr. Pitts, you can throw in one or two, whatever you want to do. But I love the fact that we talked tonight about unconditional acceptance and love. The kids, our children, deserve that. God looked down on this earth and saw a parent that he wanted to have birth in that family. There's a reason that child, there is never an accidental birth. There's accidental parents, but not accidental births. So in that, we need to understand and love and acceptance. So Dr. Burgoon, thank you for that key takeaway. And then another one I want to throw in there, education, understanding, learning, and getting that information out, not just to doctors and therapists and counselors, but the mom and dad, teachers, and the people that are just sitting at restaurants and shopping at Walmart. In every walk of life, they need this information. What do either one of you have one or two you want to throw on the key ring?
I just think that it's really important for our listeners to be mindful that, they may be experiencing ACEs already, and to be deliberate and intentional in seeking help and additional support to address these issues. they're not going to go away if you don't address them. You have to be willing to get the additional help, the additional support that you need so that you can properly parent your children. And if your children, whether it's your own children, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, your neighbor's kid, whatever the case may be, if they've also experienced ACEs, then be empathetic enough, be willing to meet those other parents, those other caregivers in that place and space of common humanity and lend a helping hand. You know, tell them to listen to the recording of this show and get some key tips. Tell them to reach out to us through social media and ask questions if they don't believe or realize that there are support resources in their communities, because certainly we can point you in the right direction if you're unaware of the resources in your area. Everyone on the show tonight has a global reach. We are very well connected. We know a lot of people that know a lot of people that know a lot of people. So we can definitely point you in the right direction. Don't ignore the presence of ACEs in your life.
That's good. Dr. Burgoon, do you have one?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, for most people who experienced a number of ACEs, who had a lot to overcome and did so successfully, many people will look back and say, you know, in spite of the home environment that I was living in, there was this one adult, there was this teacher, there was this scout leader. They believed in me. They supported me. Even if that person may have only been present in their life for a year, you know, that's the person that opens your eyes to the fact that there's something else out there, maybe besides the violence that's going on in your home that's so normalized for you at home. And so, you know, if there's an opportunity to be that person in some child's life, take advantage of that opportunity.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Dr. Pitts, close this out. This has been awesome.
Indeed. So listeners, I want to leave you with this final thought. As we've discussed tonight, ACEs affect children and families across all of our communities. ACEs can and do impact our children's health and well-being, and they can have long-term effects on us as adults and on our health and wellness, and on the health and wellness of our children as they progress into adulthood. Some of the consequences affect entire families, communities, and our society at large. Listeners, we each have to do our part to understand, recognize, and prevent ACEs. Listeners, we are challenging each of you to get the knowledge and insights you need to help create healthier, happier childhoods for our kids today so that we can ensure much brighter futures for them tomorrow and as they go on into adulthood and start their own families. I want to thank you for tuning in tonight, and don't forget to join us next week when we discuss preventing child sexual abuse and human trafficking. Dr. Burgoon, Dr. Williams, thank you. It has truly been my honor and my privilege to share the airwaves with you tonight. Good night, everyone.
Good night, all.
Night.